My name is Samantha, but everyone calls me Sam. I never imagined that the moment defining my life would happen in a room filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the scent of cedar plank salmon. It was Ethan's 40th birthday, a night meant to celebrate his rise to success. But it became the night my family tried to break me. I was standing on a small stage in my parents' sprawling Texas home, a microphone trembling in my hand. The lights were too bright, the crowd too silent. My mother, Linda, smiled at me like a queen orchestrating her court. My father, Richard, leaned back in his chair, watching with the cool detachment of a man used to getting what he wants. Tell them. Sam, Linda said sweetly, her voice slicing through the silence. Wouldn't it be the perfect gift if you handed over the condo keys tonight? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My $450,000 condo in Austin, the home I had worked my entire adult life to own, now dangled in front of a crowd as if it were a party favor. I glanced at Ethan, but he looked away, eyes fixed on his champagne glass. I remember the gasp in the room when I said softly, "This wasn't agreed on." And then, without warning, the sharp crack of a champagne bottle against my head. I stumbled, the room spinning, the taste of iron filling my mouth, and just like that, the little sister, the afterthought, the family's silent supporter, became the center of a storm no one expected. But let me take you back. Because the night I lost my family was the night I finally found myself. I grew up in a house where Ethan's name was always spoken in gold. As kids, Ethan was the star quarterback, the debate team captain, the one who brought home trophies and certificates that lined the hallway walls. I was the shadow. In the corner, the quiet kid who loved books, who picked up the slack when chores went undone, who learned early that the best way to survive was to stay small. Mom and Dad weren't cruel back then. Not in ways you could point at and say, "Look, that's wrong." But the scales were always tipped. When Ethan missed curfew, it was, boys will be boys. When I came home late from study group, it was a lecture about responsibility. When he needed a car for prom, they co-signed the loan. When I needed help with tuition, I got a quiet, tight-lipped reminder to be more independent. I moved to Austin after college, determined to build something of my own. I poured myself into work, climbed the ladder, saved every penny. At 29, I bought my first condo, a sunlit two-bedroom, with a tiny balcony where I could drink coffee and watch the city wake up. I didn't expect applause from my family, but I thought, maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud. Instead, Ethan joked that I was getting too big for my boots, and Mom's first question wasn't congratulations, but, "Do you really need all that space alone?" So when the invitation to Ethan's birthday arrived, I hesitated, but some small part of me, the old part, the daughter still hoping, decided to go. After all, it was family. What I didn't know was that this wasn't just a party, it was an ambush. The evening air in Austin was soft and warm as I pulled up to my parents' house, a Spanish-style home glowing with string lights and laughter spilling into the yard. I stepped out of my car, smoothing down the simple navy dress I'd chosen. Nothing flashy, just clean lines and a touch of quiet elegance. From the moment I walked up the driveway, I felt it, the shift in air, the small looks, the polite but clipped greetings. A valet opened the door, but when I gave my name, the young man with the guest list paused. "You're listed as +1 under the Sullivan family block," he said, almost apologetic. My chest tightened. I forced a smile and pinned the generic badge onto my dress. Inside, the house was transformed into something straight out of a magazine spread. Jazz music floated in the background. Candles flickered on every table, and the aroma of roasted salmon filled the air. My brother Ethan stood at the center, surrounded by a glowing orbit of friends, colleagues, and admirers. I slipped through the crowd, offering quick hellos, feeling like an intruder in a world I was supposed to belong to. My place card was near the back, tucked behind a pillar next to the kitchen door, where waitstaff rushed in and out. I sat, folding and unfolding my napkin, watching the room sparkle without me. Every now and then, I caught my father's glance. Richard would offer a small nod, not a greeting, just acknowledgement, before turning back to his conversation. My mother, Linda, worked the room with effortless charm, showering Ethan with praise, bragging about his promotion, his house, his perfect marriage. I was invisible as the night went on. I found myself shrinking into the background, trying to remember why I'd come, but deep down, I knew, I wanted to believe that maybe this time, they'd see me, I never imagined what they had planned instead. The clink of forks on glasses rang out, and the lights dimmed just slightly as a hush swept over the room. A voice crackled through the microphone, and now, a few words from someone very special to us. Please welcome, Samantha Sullivan. I froze. My name echoed through the speakers, but it felt wrong, foreign, like they were calling for a stranger. My heart slammed against my ribs as I rose, knees stiff, palms damp. I hadn't been told I'd be speaking. There was no card, no script, just the bright blinding spotlight. And every eye in the room fixed on me. I made my way to the small stage, heels clicking softly on marble, stomach twisted into knots. Ethan gave me a polite nod from the head table. Linda's smile was wide, gleaming, rehearsed. My father sat back, his arm draped across his chair, a grin curling at the edges of his mouth like he was already enjoying the show. I gripped the microphone. It's a beautiful night, I began, my voice unsteady. And Ethan, you've always had a gift for lighting up the room. That's when my mother cut in, her laugh bright and sharp. Oh, Sam, she said, turning to the crowd. Wouldn't it be the perfect gift if you handed over the condo key tonight? The room stilled. It was like the air had been sucked out all at once. I blinked, my mouth dry. What? I whispered, not into the mic, just to her. Linda's smile stayed frozen. You know, sweetheart, the condo, you're always traveling, and Ethan and Claire are newlyweds. It just makes sense. My father's voice boomed from the table. Come on, Sam, it's just a formality. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't a suggestion, it was a setup. The condo is not a gift, I said into the microphone, my voice tightening. A ripple of murmurs spread across the room. Then, without warning, Richard stood. For a split second I thought maybe he'd smooth things over, but his hand shot out, grabbing the champagne bottle on the dessert table. He swung, the glass hit just above my temple. With a sharp, sickening crack, I stumbled. The floor tilted, and in the blur of gasps, camera flashes and cold marble under my knees, one truth rose clear and sharp through the haze. This was never my family's love. It was ownership. And that night I broke free. The emergency room was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, no matter how many blankets they gave you. I sat alone on a stiff hospital cot, pressing gauze to the side of my head, listening to the steady beep of machines, and the low murmur of nurses behind the curtain. My phone vibrated relentlessly in my bag. Missed calls, texts, notifications, but not a single one from Ethan. Not even to check if I was alive. By the time I got home, the painkillers dulled the throbbing, but they couldn't touch the ache in my chest. I wanted to believe the worst was over. I wanted to believe that the crack of the champagne bottle was the end of the betrayal, but the worst was just beginning. The next morning, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, Ms. Sullivan, this is Jana from Home Key Realty. Just confirming the 2 p.m. showing at your condo today. My blood ran cold. I didn't schedule a showing, I said quietly. Oh, Jana sounded confused, shuffling papers. Well, the request came under your name, and Mr. Richard Sullivan is listed as a co-signer. My mouth went dry. I remembered then how last week at dinner my father had scooped up my purse by accident. How he'd handed it back with that lazy, sheepish smile. He had taken my spare key. I hung up without another word. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen, hands trembling in my lap. Then, as if on autopilot, I grabbed my phone and dialed. Marlo, I said when the lawyer picked up. I need to meet today. It's urgent. That afternoon, I stood with a locksmith at my condo, watching him change the locks, add a deadbolt, and scrape away the faint marks around the door handle. Not a break-in, just familiar, entitled hands trying to erase me from my own home. As the sun dipped behind the Austin skyline, I sat on my couch, watching the light fade across the floor. The girl I had been, the one desperate for family approval, was slipping away, piece by piece, and in her place, someone new was beginning to rise. The next morning, I sat across from Marlo in his downtown office, a sleek glass and steel space that smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. He flipped through the documents I'd brought, emails, bank transfers, the condo deed, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he looked up, his voice was calm but firm. Sam, they made a mess. But here's the silver lining. You still hold the deed to the house they're living in. Remember, you bought it during the foreclosure in 2010 to save them. I stared at him, the memory crashing in. I had been 24, working 2 jobs, and when my parents Nearly lost the house. I'd quietly stepped in, putting it in my name to keep them afloat. They'd never transferred it back. Marlo pushed a pen across the desk. You have options. For a moment, the weight of it settled over me. The ache of every sacrifice, every overlooked kindness, every quiet hope that they would one day see me as more than a spare part. And then slowly, I reached for the pen. By noon, Marlo had filed the eviction notice. There was no screaming match, no family confrontation in the driveway. 3 days later, the sheriff delivered the papers, and it was over. I saw it not in person, but in a grainy video Ethan posted to the family group chat, a home security clip, showing Richard opening the door in his robe, toast in hand, blinking at the officer. Linda hovered behind him, frozen mid-sip of coffee. The officer handed over the envelope, said something soft that the mic didn't catch, and the moment their faces crumpled was the moment I exhaled for the first time in years. That night, I sat on my balcony, looking out at the city, wrapped in a blanket. A cup of tea in my hands. I wasn't angry. I wasn't triumphant. I was free. And for the first time, that was enough. The silence that followed was almost louder than the fight. For days, my phone stayed eerily quiet. No calls from Richard or Linda, no texts from Ethan, no apologies. No explanations. Just a vacuum of absence where a family used to be. Then one afternoon, an envelope slipped through the mail slot at my condo. Cream-colored, thick paper. My name scrawled across the front in Linda's delicate handwriting. Inside was a single sheet. This was never your home anyway. No signature, no plea. Just 7 words that landed like a stone in my chest. I sat at the kitchen table, turning the paper over in my hands. There was no grief left to squeeze out of me. No tears waiting behind my eyes. I folded the letter twice, set it aside, and for the first time in my life, I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't draft a reply. I didn't ask for a conversation. I simply let it sit, a monument to everything they had refused to be. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire, Ethan's wife. It was a photo of an old family album, its leather cover worn thin, the pages spread open across her lap. I thought you should know, she wrote, page after page, photo after photo, and not a single image of me. Birthdays, holidays, graduations, weddings. It was as if I had never existed. And then one more message. They've been erasing you for years. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen, letting the truth wash over me in waves. It wasn't just the condo. It wasn't just the money. It was the story they wanted to tell, one where I was never part of the family to begin with. That night, I pulled an old box from my closet, one I hadn't opened in years. Inside were the pieces of a life they couldn't erase. A medal from a middle school science fair. A postcard from my first solo trip. A napkin folded into a swan from that terrible party. I sat on the floor, surrounded by quiet proof that I had existed, and that I still did. The days that followed felt strangely still. I settled into a rhythm, mornings on the balcony with coffee, afternoons working quietly from home, evenings spent with a book or soft music humming in the background. The constant ache of waiting for a call. An apology, a confrontation, began to fade. Then, one evening, just as the sky turned pink over the Austin skyline, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Claire. I'm sorry. I didn't know how far they went. You deserved better. Attached was another photo. This time, the baby shower invitation Ethan and Claire were sending out. At the bottom, in Claire's careful handwriting, was a single line. You're always welcome here. If you want. I stared at the screen, my heart a tight knot in my chest. For a moment, I thought about deleting the message, about turning away, shutting another door, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the softness in her words. Maybe it was the quiet acknowledgement I had waited years to hear. That night, I didn't text back. I didn't RSVP. Instead, I sat with the message, letting it settle inside me, like a stone finding its place in a riverbed. Some things, I was learning, didn't need immediate answers. And for the first time, I understood, healing didn't mean pretending it never happened. Healing meant standing in the wreckage and choosing to build something new. I got up, moved to the kitchen, and made a simple dinner, pasta with garlic and thyme. I set to plates. Not because anyone was coming, but because it reminded me that I was no longer living a life shaped by what they took from me. As I ate, the condo filled with the small, steady sounds of home. A boiling pot, a fork against a plate, the soft shuffle of my own breath. Outside, The city moved on, and inside, so did I. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows, soft and golden. Warming the hardwood floors under my feet, I walked through the condo slowly, barefoot, coffee in hand, tracing the edges of a space that had once felt like a fortress against the world, and now felt like freedom. On the dining table sat the swan-shaped napkin I had kept from that night, its folds softened, edges a little frayed. I ran my finger along its creases, remembering the girl who had sat at the back of the room, desperate to belong. And realizing just how far she had come, a knock sounded at the door. When I opened it, Amina stood there, my oldest friend, a tiny orchid plant cradled in her arms, and a smile that didn't need words. "You need more green in here," she said, brushing past me, setting the orchid on the windowsill like it had always belonged. That evening, we cooked together, filling the apartment with the scent of garlic and fresh herbs, our laughter bouncing off the walls. We ate slowly, talked about books, work, life, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight in my chest lift, not all at once, but piece by piece as we finished dinner. I looked across the table at Amina, raised my glass, and smiled. Too. Building our own tables, I said softly. She clinked her glass to mine, and never begging for a seat again. That night, long after Amina left, I sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker like stars. My phone rested face down on the table. No texts from my parents, no new apologies, and for once, I didn't need them. Sometimes justice doesn't come wrapped in revenge. Sometimes it looks like the quiet peace, like the sound of your own breath in a room that finally feels like home. I closed my eyes, let the silence settle over me, and whispered, almost to myself, "I'm still here," and that was enough.